What were the concerns that you raised?
That I observed an officer use excessive force.
You're concerned about Dave Booth using excessive force?
Correct.
And you communicated that to Sergeant Jarvie?
I did.
At what point do you think that Dave Booth used excessive force?
When he put his hand on Jesse's neck and squeezed his neck to put him into the back of, I believe it was Adrian's car, but that patrol car.
You're seeing excessive use of force. That's not your decision. That is a determination that the department will make. I like and I appreciate and I respect you going through the process. Hey, I have a concern. You raise it to your sergeant. That's the right thing to do.
We've just been told chokeholds are against policy and all, George Floyd and everything else and people going to prison and all of this stuff. And then we see that happen, and that was very clear to me that was inappropriate.
What's a chokehold mean?
Anything applying pressure to the neck. I mean, they're saying George Floyd, they're relating that to a chokehold, and he had a knee on the back of his neck, and you can't stop breathing from the back of the neck. So I watched his hands squeeze around the front of his neck. I had a second to myself to should I have stepped in and grabbed Chief's arm and said, hey, quit. I think by time everything processed what was happening, it was done. And I never saw the video, so I never saw it besides in that moment.
Through the process, it was determined that it's excessive use of force. Then you're going to be in that boat.
I understand that, but that's also not valid, because if the law is going to sit and say that an officer is legally required to intervene when there's excessive force being used, that's an in-the-moment thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do I intervene on something that has to be determined by this later process?
But you didn't intervene.
No, I didn't.
So
but
you don't need to get with the officer. If you didn't intervene, then why would you need to get with the officer and tell him?
Because the reason I didn't intervene is because there was not time for me to intervene, because it was done.
So were there any other parts of that incident that you considered to be old school versus there's a different way of doing it now?
No.
So just that piece. Dave Booth, his hand on Jesse's neck, squeezing.
The old school thing is just kind of how I came up with to maybe have that conversation. I mean, that's excessive force isn't old school. It happens. So I don't know. I don't want to label it as that was being old school. I'm sure that happens. And then maybe it needs to be more clear that I in no way threw Chief under the bus to Adrian. I mean, that was why I made it a point to do that, is that was me trying to have a conversation on, I guess, appropriate use of force or whatever that may be without throwing Chief under the bus, knowing, having seen what I'd seen.
All right, I think I got that. And in the report that I do, I'll make sure that I include this part that you did not intend to throw the Chief under the bus with Adrian on that part.
Even after McTaggart expressed his concerns, the department dragged his feet so long that he thought the incident would be ignored.
I made it clear from the beginning that I was doing what I felt like I was obligated to do, and that was where that's why I was having that conversation, because policy said that, and so I was fulfilling policy. Policy said report it to a supervisor, so I made that clear. This is me reporting it to you. I'm done with it.
So, to me, and here's the issue that I have, is that you're trying to say I was concerned, but really I had no reason to be concerned because I didn't see the full thing of what happened.
I disagree with that. I think that
help us understand.
I was making it clear that based on what I saw, from my perspective, I observed excessive force. I was also recognizing that excessive force is not determined by my perspective. That's what it was. It's as simple as that. So maybe I'll clarify to you then. I do not believe that there was anything that warranted that. But I also acknowledge that it is a possibility that something could have happened that I didn't see. That's a possibility.
So that does help us, because now we know clearly that you think that Dave Booth used excessive use of force.
Yeah, and if I didn't, it would have just died.
Your perception is wrong. That might have been your perspective at the time, but it's been found to be false. So there was no excessive use of force. So you've got to do a written statement on what your concern is.
So I guess let me ask this. That That's obviously in a separate policy
From what?
for the process to file a complaint, right? Is that the policy that you're...
Separate from use of force in two different places, you mean?
Well, because the policy that I came across was policy that I was doing what I was doing, and hopefully you have it, you probably have it, is, yeah, I mean, that's what I was doing right there, is that orange paragraph. That's what I was doing. It says report. So I wasn't filing a formal complaint on chief. That's not what I was doing. I was satisfying that highlighted part right there. And I didn't even read the formal complaint policy because that's not what I was doing.
When there is a concern that someone raises, or a complaint, you can use them interchangeably, that someone raises, it immediately needs to go to the proper supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be documented. So in this situation, it's not, what Dave Booth did is not even use of force. What did Dave do? I think that what's an issue is with his right hand, he took it and put it on Rodriguez's neck and squeezed. I don't know if there's a dispute on what that technique or tactic is. Okay. Technique or tactic. So were we taught to do that somehow in any of our trainings? Grab someone by the throat and do that kind of a thing? So the application of physical technique or tactic, chemical agent, or a weapon to another person. It's not a use of force when a person allows himself or herself to be searched, escorted, or handcuffed. So by the definition, if you're not taught the technique or tactic, it's not a use of force.
So, I mean, the statement you just made, if I punch somebody in the throat, but I've never been taught to do that, then that's not a use of force. Is that...
So in your training,
maybe I'm misunderstanding you because your statement sounds ridiculous to me.
In your trainings, you've never been taught to punch someone?
Not in the throat, no. Like, we've been taught to grab people, but we've never been taught to grab people by the throat. So, I mean, it's what it...
Yeah, right.
How specific are you going to be on
it? That's my point, is that you've never been taught to grab someone by the throat. So you have to take...
We've been taught specifically to not grab people by the throat.
No, I disagree. You've been taught to not do a chokehold.
Okay. And I don't want it to appear that I'm trying to argue to the point that I think Chief is guilty of something. I did not ever want to be in this situation in the first place, and I'm not the one trying to say he needs to whatever. Like, I don't like this situation. But I thought a lot about it, and I made a very informed decision, and I'm a very experienced officer, and I read case law, and I read lawsuits, and I know what is appropriate use of force. But what you're saying is not changing my perspective of what I saw. Nothing's going to change that. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah. Well,
because
Lucas, it really comes down to the future, your future in the police department.
Sure.
So you can dig in your heels and say,
and that's not what I'm doing.
This is how I feel, and no one's going to change. And okay, that's your decision. You just won't get any trusted positions having to do with DT and use of force and sergeant and those kinds of things because you're not willing to learn and be open-minded to it.
Sure. March 31st, correct?
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
Lucas, are you aware of anyone else that's concerned about excessive use of force in this incident? I should say in the police department. Did you ever speak with the mayor?
No.
Manager?
No.
Attorney?
No.
So a couple things. One, so here's a statute on an issue which I think helps you feel more comfortable on some stuff. So an employer may not take adverse action against an employee because the employee communicates in good faith, that's the main piece there, a violation of suspected violation of law. So you've done that, and it's in good faith. How do we know that? An employee is presumed to have communicated in good faith if the employee gives written notice. To a person in authority over the person alleged. So, and then there's this piece of an employer may not take adverse action against an employee because an employee participates or gives information in an investigation. So, by doing that piece, and also by consenting to the interview as well, which I know it's required, but you get the good faith presumption. I think that's a great thing here.
Yep.
It shows everyone that you're just trying to do the best you can. You don't have anything against anyone. You're researching things. You're conscientious. You're wanting to help train employees. That's all you were doing. And I think we can say the same thing now. I don't feel any
I don't see a
different.
change. Not at all.
So this is the Utah Protection of Public Employees Act. So separate from policy, state law keeps police department, Heber City themselves, or any supervisor or administrator from trying to somehow retaliate or treat you different. And so I'll make sure that in the report, I will come back to you if I'm concerned about something. But at this point, you can expect that in the report, it's like you came in good faith. You cooperated through the whole thing. It's not comfortable and everyone hates it.
Right.
And we do too. And let's try to move on and